Jedi Master Too Cool, who every now and then asks me to do a certain kind of video, and I don't mind that, by the way. In fact, I appreciate it. I don't always do videos that people request because sometimes, I don't know very much about the topic, or I don't know, it just doesn't interest me. But this one is pretty interesting. He requested I talk about the Cologne Attacks. And, okay. I'll try to do that. I wasn't going to make a video about this because, partly because I have a cold, and an hour ago I was coughing my head off and I could barely talk, but I'll see if I can pull it off. But the other reason is that I don't really know if anything needs to be said about it. But I guess maybe it does. Maybe there are things that need to be said about it. Alright, so what is there to say about this? Well, the main thing is that it is utterly predictable that this sort of thing will happen. Because it has already happened in multiple places in Europe. This is a recognizable pattern. The specific incident is unique, of course, but Muslims raping European women in Europe, this is not a new thing. Muslims sexually assaulting European women in Europe, this is not a new thing. There is the rape epidemic in Sweden. There is the well-known fact that a disproportionate amount of the rape and sexual assault that is committed in places such as Norway, Sweden, Denmark, I think also the UK, but I'm not sure about that one, is committed by Muslims. Muslims have formed separate, insular, and hostile communities in Europe. The banlieues around Paris and other French cities, the Muslim and black ghettos in Swedish cities, and parts of Belgium that are no-go zones for the police, like where the Paris attackers came from. None of this should be surprising to someone who understands human nature and who is not ideologically blinded to reality. But clearly, it does not fit the liberal humanist worldview. I'm not even talking about leftist. I'm not talking about extreme leftist or social justice warrior. I'm talking about the consensus worldview in the West, which is that human beings are basically good, nice, rational, and basically they're all liberal humanists on the inside. And so if you have Muslims moving from wherever to Europe, they're just like Europeans, and they will, become enlightened, liberal humanists. More or less. Maybe they will retain some of their culture. Maybe they will retain certain aspects of their culture, like their dress or their food. But it's very superficial. And, the famous words of Martin Luther King Jr., that we should judge men by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. Well, what is implicit in that statement is that there is no correlation between the color of someone's skin and the content of their character. Or, for that matter, their religion and the content of their character. But biology and culture play a huge role in shaping character. So, surprise, surprise, not everybody has the same character. And character attributes are not distributed uniformly randomly in the human population. They're not distributed the same way in every population. Men are different from women, blacks are different from whites, and Europeans are different from Middle Eastern Muslims in certain ways. It isn't very likely that people would come from a different place with a different culture, a different religion, a different language, a different diet, different taboos, different attitudes towards sex and marriage and family, and get along super well and just assimilate. What you should expect if you bring a bunch of people from a completely different culture who have a different attitude toward life, and you bring them to a new place, and you don't force them to assimilate, you don't punish them for not assimilating, you reward them with free stuff for simply being there, and you allow them to have as many children as they want. What you should expect is that they will develop a belief that justifies taking whatever you are offering them and giving you nothing back. They are going to develop an ideology that they are superior to you and that you owe them these things, that you owe them a living. Why are they going to do this? Well, because people are selfish. People are not nice. And this is what people always do. They identify as a member of a group, and they view their group as the good and outsiders as bad. And they are hostile toward outsiders. This is a pattern that humans have been following for thousands and thousands of years, probably more than 100,000 years. Since we became the apex predators, we have been preying on each other. And we do that as groups. We don't do it as individuals. And how we organize that predation is we use morality. We use the concepts of good and evil and a myth that goes along with those concepts that we, our team, Team X, is good, and the people that we want to prey upon, Team Y, are bad. And so we can kill them, and we can rape their women, and we can take their stuff. We've been doing this for our entire history as human beings. We've been dividing into groups. We've been coming up with narratives that justify killing others outside of our group, right? That direct violence outside the group. That's what society is. It's not a big altruistic love fest. It's cooperation, and because life is intrinsically violent, it's a way of directing violence outside the group. That's what societies do. They direct violence outside. They minimize or suppress internal conflict. But in doing so, they export violence. They export violence to other groups or to nature. But as I said, we are apex predators, and there's only so much nature that we can exploit, and eventually we come into conflict with other societies and we fight them. And we've been doing this for a very, very long time. And it's built into our nature as human beings. This way of doing things, this way of seeing the world, us versus them, the good versus the bad. I've mentioned this before, but almost all of our stories, almost all of even our fairy tales, are exercises in justifying warfare. genocidal warfare. Because for thousands and thousands of years, that's what we have been doing. That's what our ancestors were doing. They were committing genocidal warfare. Because life is violent. And living beings are selfish. It's really not that complicated, but you have to accept these fundamental realities. I just saw on Twitter that there may have been some retaliation attacks today or tonight, whatever it is. I don't know. I'll probably find more about it tomorrow. Right now it's kind of late at night or early in the morning here. I think you're going to see more civil unrest in Europe as native Europeans start fighting back on the streets. Once they realize their governments are not going to protect them, their governments are not going to even take their side, right? The governments are taking the side of these, I'm going to call them invaders, because I think that's kind of what they are. If the governments are going to take the side of the invaders, then the native people are going to organize in a more tribal way, and they're going to start fighting back. So there's going to be more and more violence. It's all very predictable. There's going to be an increasing breakdown of the social order. One thing that kind of annoys me is when they call these people economic migrants. See, I don't think they're economic migrants. For one thing, I'm not really sure how they're getting all the way to Germany from places like Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, North Africa. It actually requires quite a bit of money to do that. They're not going there to get jobs. I don't think they're economic migrants. They might be welfare migrants in a sense. They might be going to get welfare. But I think probably there's another motive for a lot of these guys. And they are guys, most of them. And it is sex. Nothing motivates young men more than sex, unless they're starving, and these guys are not starving. Young men are motivated to fuck. Very strongly motivated. And these guys have gotten the idea that European women are easy to fuck. Viewed from their cultural perspective, Europe is a land of loose women, of sluts and whores. Not of virtuous women, but of easy women, of women that, in their culture, it would be considered permissible to sexually assault and rape. And they have seen all the images, all the pornography, all the images of Western sexuality. Now, we who live in the West understand that a lot of that is just fantasy. We also understand that, women expressing their sexuality or flaunting their sexual power is not an invitation or a license to assault them. We know this, but from their perspective, from their moral and religious perspective, that's what it is. European women are sluts and whores because they act like sluts and whores. And they can be treated as, as human garbage. And not only that, they are outsiders. They are not Muslims. They are infidels. So it shouldn't be surprising when these people act in this kind of way. It shouldn't be surprising that there is an epidemic of rape among Muslims in places like Sweden. There is a huge culture clash. And you're bringing a lot of young men into a completely different culture with completely different norms of behavior where they are surrounded by what they perceive to be slutty, loose, immoral, infidel women who deserve to be sexually assaulted and raped. And then these people are shocked when it actually happens. I'd be shocked if it didn't happen. I mean, it's so predictable. All of this is predictable. And it's just going to keep getting worse until people in the West wake up from their humanist fantasies, from their fantasies about human nature, until they wake up to the reality of human nature, or, what is more likely, they develop a new myth that they are superior, that they are better, and that Muslims are inferior, that they are bad, and start fighting back. They're probably not going to, become Darwinian thinkers about human nature. So they're probably going to develop a mythos that justifies fighting back because they need to fight back. And another thing about the way Muslims act in Europe, and I've seen this in the United States, in Canada, they're very cliquish and clannish. That they form little cartels. They form all Muslim businesses. They show a lot of nepotism and in-group preference based on religion and race and family connections. And we in the West tolerate this. If white people set up a shop and they only hired other white people, especially if it was a large enough business, they would start to be questioned and possibly they would be prosecuted. But we tend to turn a blind eye when others do this to us. We allow people into our societies and we almost encourage them to other us, to view us as the other and to abuse us and to, and we give them a moral justification for taking advantage of us or abusing our hospitality and treating us like dirt. So why should we be surprised when they do that? I saw a news story the other day about an imam in Toronto who was telling his congregation that they should only do business with Muslims. They should only hire Muslims and they should go to Muslim businesses. Imagine if a Christian were preaching the same thing to his congregation. He would probably be charged with a human rights offense or something like that. So, I don't know. I mean, it's stupidity. It's just idiocy to do this kind of thing. I'm not saying all Muslims are rapists. Of course not. I don't hate Muslims. I'm not a big fan of the religion, but, I don't mind Muslims who just practice their religion and obey the law and pay their taxes and get jobs. But I think, the welfare is the other big part of this, right? If there wasn't welfare in Europe, these people wouldn't be streaming in. You would get a much better type of person. You would get Muslim immigrants, but you would only get people who are willing to assimilate and work hard and pay taxes. If you punish people for committing crimes and you don't give people welfare, then you won't get a lot of criminals and you won't get a lot of people on welfare having 8 babies and, replacing your population with more people on welfare. But this is just another example of how communism destroys everything. Communism creates entropy. It is order destroying. Every cell in your body and every living being has a boundary, and it has to maintain that boundary. Societies are a kind of order, and they need to have boundaries, and they need to control what comes across those boundaries, and they need to bring in things that are useful, that are good for them, and expel waste, and keep out things that are bad for them. And we need to do this with people. We need to control the kinds of people that come into our societies. I don't believe in a completely closed border or racially pure societies, but bringing in large numbers of people of a different race with a very different religion and cultural norms, and bringing them in to go on welfare without any kind of selection for productivity, and bringing in a lot of males, a very unbalanced population, a lot of young males with high testosterone from sexually repressive societies. I mean, this is a recipe for disaster. It is just fucking retarded. And, yeah, I don't know. Is it ideological blindness, or is it a conspiracy to destroy Western civilization? I think it's mostly ideological blindness. I don't think it's a big conspiracy. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know. There's so many things going on right now in the world. There is no simple answer. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the Cologne attacks and the probable effects of them, and the general pattern of human behavior that they exhibit. This is not something that is completely out of the blue. This is normal human behavior. We're not lovey-dovey little fucking smurfs. We are animals created by evolution to maximize reproduction. Thanks for listening.